What the hell do you think you're doing? Maya froze, her breath caught in her chest. Maxwell clutched at her shoulders, startled by his father's tone. His cowboy hat tumbled to the floor. Alexander stormed into the room, sharp in a tailored charcoal suit, his jaw tight with fury. Are you out of your mind, Miss Williams? Crawling on the floor with my son like a damn circus act? Maya gently helped Maxwell off her back and stood up slowly. Mr. Reed, he wanted to play. I made sure he was safe. He could have fallen. He could have hit his head. You think I'd let some woman I hired as house staff put my son at risk like that? I wasn't putting him at risk, Maya said, her voice firm but respectful. He hasn't laughed like that in weeks. He hasn't even spoken much since the funeral. Alexander's eyes narrowed. So, you decided to cross the line? To be more than what you're paid to be? I'm not trying to overstep, sir, but Maxwell's grieving, just like you are. I said enough. His tone turned colder, dismissive. Without another word, he walked over, picked up Maxwell, and held him close. The boy didn't resist, but his smile had vanished. His small arms hung limp at his sides. Come on, Alexander muttered, carrying him out of the room. Maya watched them go, her chest tight with helplessness. That night, the house was quiet again. Too quiet. Maya cleaned up the scattered toys and folded the little cowboy hat neatly, placing it beside Maxwell's pillow. She turned off the hallway lights and prepared to leave when a blood-curdling scream pierced the silence. Mom! Maya bolted up the stairs without hesitation. Inside Maxwell's room, the boy thrashed beneath the sheets, soaked in sweat, sobbing in his sleep. No, Mommy, don't go! Don't leave me again! Maya, help! Alexander stood frozen beside the bed. Maya rushed past him, dropped to her knees, and gently took Maxwell's hand. I'm here, sweetheart. You're safe. You're not alone. Maxwell clung to her instantly, his tears soaking her shirt. She rocked him, whispering lullabies, her voice low and soothing. After a few minutes, his breathing steadied. His tiny fingers relaxed their grip, and he drifted back to sleep. Maya stood, turned toward Alexander, and spoke quietly but firmly. I know you're hurting, sir, but so is he. He doesn't understand why his mom is gone. He only understands who's still here. Alexander didn't respond. His expression was unreadable, caught between shame and resistance. She walked past him to the door but stopped just before leaving. If you're going to threaten me again for doing what's right for that child, she said without turning around, go ahead and fire me now, but I will not stand by while he drowns in silence. And neither should you. Then she left. Downstairs, the clock ticked toward midnight. Maya sat alone in the kitchen, lit only by a single warm lamp. She pulled a piece of paper from her handbag, creased and smudged from years of carrying, and began to write, Dear Mr. Reed, you don't know me beyond the chores I do, and I don't pretend to know the weight you carry. But I lost a child, too. Her name was Laya. She was my whole world. I know what it means to hold someone as they fade, to wake up and realize they're never coming back. Maxwell is still here. But if you push him away long enough, a part of him might disappear too. Grief doesn't care how strong we are. But connection saves people. I'm not asking you to feel better overnight. I'm asking you not to give up on your son, and not to push away the few people who still care. She folded the letter gently, placed it beside the coffee machine where he always brewed his morning espresso, and walked away without looking back. The next morning, Alexander found the letter. He stood over it for a long time before picking it up. He read every word. That evening, Maya passed the study on her way to collect laundry. Something made her pause. Through the slightly cracked door, she saw Alexander sitting awkwardly, uncomfortably, in Maxwell's tiny chair, knees scrunched. The boy sat on the floor with a picture book in his lap, pointing at the illustrations. Alexander was listening. He didn't interrupt. He didn't glance at his phone. He just listened, nodding gently, his eyes on his son. And for the first time in many months, Maya smiled. Not with relief, but with something deeper. Hope. Hope that perhaps this house could become a home again, one fragile moment at a time. 2 days later, Maxwell was playing alone in the backyard. It was early afternoon, the sun high and casting golden rays across the manicured lawn. He chased butterflies with a plastic net, giggling to himself. Maya, tidying up poolside towels, kept a watchful eye. In a blink, he darted toward the koi pond near the edge of the yard, one of his favorite spots. The stone path curved gently, but a patch of moss near the edge was slick from morning dew. His foot slipped. "Maxwell!" Maya shouted. In one leap, she was across the yard. The boy toppled, arms flailing, inches from the pond's edge. She caught him by the waist just as his foot grazed the water's surface. Her heart pounded wildly as she pulled him safely into her arms. At that moment, Alexander burst through the sliding glass door, alerted by Maya's shout. "What happened?" he demanded, breathless. Maxwell, startled at first, looked up with wide eyes, then smiled and pointed. "Miss Maya saved me? Daddy, I almost fell, but she got me." Maya stood holding the boy close, her knees muddied, her chest heaving. She didn't say a word, just looked at Alexander. Alexander looked at his son, then at her. Guilt flushed across his face. Later that evening, as Maya folded fresh towels in the laundry room, Alexander stepped in. His tone was lower, softer than it had ever been. "I read your letter," he said. Maya looked up, unsure whether to brace herself or breathe. "I've been a fool," he continued. "You didn't just save my son today. You've been saving him in ways I didn't even realize." She didn't respond. He cleared his throat. "You shouldn't be doing laundry. You shouldn't be scrubbing floors." Maya raised an eyebrow. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying—" He paused, then offered a rare, genuine glance. "You're not the housekeeper anymore. You're Maxwell's nanny, effective immediately." Maya blinked. "Are you sure?" "I should have been sure a long time ago." For the first time, their silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was peaceful, mutually understood. And somewhere deep inside, Alexander's guarded heart, something cracked just enough to let in the light. The morning light spilled into the Reed estate like a blessing. But for Alexander Reed, it only brought another day of responsibilities he didn't want to face. He sat at the kitchen counter in his perfectly pressed shirt, untouched espresso cooling by his side. The letter from Maya still sat folded neatly in his pocket. He had read it twice more before bed, and again when he woke. The words clung to him like a thorn he couldn't remove. Grief is a thief, but connection saves people. He looked up when Maxwell bounded into the room, hair tousled, pajamas wrinkled, clutching his cowboy hat under his arm. "Good morning, Daddy," the boy said, not with his usual spark, but softer. "Morning, champ," Alexander replied, forcing a small smile. He reached out and ruffled his son's hair. Maxwell slid onto the stool beside him and put the hat on his head. "Is Miss Maya coming today?" "She lives here, doesn't she?" Alexander replied. "Yes, she's coming." As if on cue, Maya entered the kitchen with a tray of toast, orange juice, and scrambled eggs. Her uniform was crisp, her movement steady, but Alexander noticed how she carried herself differently this morning, like someone who knew her role had changed. He cleared his throat. "From today on," he announced, "Miss Williams is not the housekeeper. She's your nanny, Max." Maxwell blinked, fork halfway to his mouth. "My nanny? But I don't need a nanny, Daddy," Alexander bristled. "Everyone your age needs someone to look after them." "I have you," Maxwell said simply. The words hit harder than Alexander expected. He glanced at Maya, who kept her expression carefully neutral. She set down the tray and busied herself with pouring juice. "Daddy's busy," Alexander said, softer this time. "And Maya, she's better at things I'm not." Maxwell looked at Maya, then back at his father. "Like playing horses?" Maya almost smiled. "Like making sure you don't fall into ponds." The boy laughed, and for a moment the tension dissolved. Alexander's chest eased, though he still felt the sting of his son's earlier words. "I have you." Later that morning, while Alexander buried himself in conference calls in his study, Maya led Maxwell out to the garden. He wore a little backpack stuffed with crayons, a notebook, and toy cars. They settled under the shade of the large oak tree at the edge of the yard. "Why did Daddy make you my nanny?" Maxwell asked, drawing crooked lines in his notebook. "Because he knows you need someone to take care of you," Maya replied gently. "And he can't always be here." Maxwell frowned. "He used to be." Maya leaned closer, brushing a curl from his forehead. "Your dad misses your mom very much. Sometimes when people are sad, they forget how to show love. But it doesn't mean they don't feel it." The boy was quiet for a long time. Then, in a whisper, he said, "I talk to Mommy at night. Do you think she hears me?" Maya's throat tightened. She swallowed and nodded. "I believe she does. And I think she wants you to laugh again. Just like yesterday." Maxwell smiled faintly, scribbling a stick figure with curly hair. "This is Mommy. This is me. And that's you." He pointed to a tall figure holding their hands. Maya blinked hard to stop the tears. "That's a beautiful picture, Max." Inside the house, Alexander stood at the study window, phone in hand, staring out at the oak tree. He could see Maya's head bent close to his son's, the two of them framed by sunlight. Maxwell leaned into her, relaxed, safe. Something twisted. In Alexander's chest, envy, guilt, longing, all tangled together. When the call ended, he walked to the kitchen. He found the folded letter still in his pocket, pulled it out, and read it again. Every line burned. He poured himself another coffee, but didn't touch it. That evening during dinner, Maxwell chattered about his drawings. "And then Miss Maya said Mommy still hears me. So I told her about the princess in the tower, and she said maybe Daddy could be the knight." Alexander's fork froze midway to his mouth. He glanced at Maya, who lowered her gaze quickly. "Eat your vegetables, Max," he said quietly. "I'm not hungry." Alexander sighed. "You need to eat." Maxwell pushed the plate away and crossed his arms. "Mommy used to make spaghetti on Tuesdays. Why don't we have that anymore?" The room went still. Alexander's chest ached. He opened his mouth, but no words came. Maya, sensing his struggle, spoke gently. "How about we make spaghetti tomorrow? You can help me cook, Max." The boy's face brightened. "Really?" "Really," Maya said with a nod. Alexander set down his fork. "Tomorrow, then," he said softly. That night, after Maxwell was asleep, Alexander found Maya in the hallway folding laundry. "I owe you an apology," he said abruptly. She blinked. "For what?" "For yelling at you. For treating you like you were nothing more than hired help." He looked down at the floor, his jaw tight. "You saved my son more than once, and you've done what I couldn't. Given him back his smile." Maya set the folded sheet aside. "I didn't do it for gratitude, Mr. Reed. I did it because he needs someone to see him, to hear him." "I should have been that person," Alexander said quietly. "You still can be," she replied. "But you have to choose it." Their eyes met, and for the first time, Alexander didn't look away. The following morning, true to her promise, Maya brought Maxwell into the kitchen. They tied aprons around their waists, the boys comically oversized. Flour dusted the counters as they rolled out noodles and stirred sauce. Alexander stepped into the room, briefcase in hand, ready to leave for the office. He stopped in the doorway. Maxwell looked up, face smudged with tomato, and grinned. "Daddy, we're making Mommy's spaghetti." Alexander's throat tightened. He set down his briefcase and walked in. "Mind if I help?" Maxwell clapped. "Yes, you can stir." So Alexander stirred clumsily while Maya guided Maxwell's small hands over the rolling pin. For the first time in months, the kitchen was filled with laughter and the smell of home. That night after dinner, Maxwell fell asleep almost instantly, belly full, smile still on his face. Alexander lingered by his bedside, watching his son breathe peacefully. Maya stood in the doorway, silent. "He looks like her when he sleeps," Alexander murmured. "Maybe," Maya said softly. For a long time they stood together in the quiet. Then Alexander whispered, "Thank you, Maya." She shook her head. "Thank him. He's the reason I'm here." As Alexander turned off the lamp, he felt the thorn of grief still lodged deep. But for the first time, he also felt the faint pulse of healing, guided by the steady presence of a woman who had already lost everything, yet still gave everything she had. And for that, he knew he could never treat her as just the help again. The sound of rain pattered softly against the glass windows of the Reed estate, a steady rhythm that filled the silence of the afternoon. Maxwell sat cross-legged on the living room rug, coloring in the outline of a castle, while Maya read aloud from a storybook, her voice calm, warm, and melodic. The boy was listening, but his crayon strokes grew slower, his shoulders sagging. When she paused to turn the page, he suddenly said, "I don't remember what Mommy's voice sounded like anymore." Maya set the book aside and reached for his small hand. "That's okay, Max. Memories fade a little over time, but the love doesn't go away. And sometimes, if you close your eyes, you'll feel it, even without sound." Maxwell pressed his lips together. "Do you think Daddy feels it too?" Before Maya could answer, Alexander appeared in the doorway, damp from a dash through the rain, his tie loosened after a long meeting downtown. He had heard his son's question. His expression shifted, something between guilt and sorrow. "I do," Alexander said softly, stepping further into the room. "I feel it every day." Maxwell's eyes lit up with surprise. "You do?" "Yes." He crouched beside his son, resting one hand on the carpet. "I miss her voice, too. I miss her laugh. But sometimes when I look at you, I hear her again, in my heart." The boy smiled faintly, then returned to coloring, more carefully this time. Maya watched Alexander with quiet gratitude. He had said the thing his son needed to hear, the words she had hoped he could say. Later that evening, after Maxwell was asleep, Alexander poured himself a glass of whiskey in the study. He sat by the fire, staring at the flames. The letter from Maya lay unfolded on the desk beside him. He wasn't a man who often revisited his words or anyone else's, but something about that letter kept calling him back. It was as if the paper itself carried weight, a reminder that grief wasn't his alone to bear. The door creaked slightly, and Maya stepped in, holding a tray with tea. "I thought maybe you could use something warmer than that," she said, nodding at the whiskey. He gave a dry chuckle. "Do I look that predictable?" "You look tired," she said gently. She set the tea on the table, then straightened. "If I've overstepped, I can leave." Alexander shook his head. "No." He studied her for a moment, then asked, "Do you ever stop thinking about it? About losing her?" Maya sat in the chair opposite, folding her hands in her lap. Her eyes softened. "I don't think you stop. I lost my daughter 4 years ago, and I still think about her every day. But over time, the sharp edges of grief dull. It doesn't cut you as deep, even if it never goes away." His throat tightened. "How do you get to that point?" "By letting people in," Maya replied. by remembering you're not alone, no matter how much you want to believe you are. They sat in silence for a long moment, the rain still drumming outside, the fire crackling between them. Alexander looked down at his glass, then at her. "Max trusts you," he said finally. "More than he trusts me." Maya shook her head. "He loves you. He's just afraid. Afraid you might leave too." The words struck him hard because deep down he knew they were true. He had been present in body but absent in spirit, and his son had felt it. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temple. "I don't want to fail him." "Then don't," Maya said simply. Her tone wasn't harsh, but it was firm. "You can't bring Rebecca back, but you can be here. That's all he needs." The next day the storm passed, and the estate was filled with the fresh smell of wet grass. Maxwell ran across the garden in rubber boots, splashing through puddles while Maya followed, holding an umbrella. Alexander stood at the patio door, watching. For the first time, he didn't feel like an intruder on their happiness. Instead, he felt a tug in his chest, a longing to join. He stepped outside, shoes soaking quickly in the mud. "Hey, Sheriff Max," he called. "Need a deputy?" Maxwell looked up, eyes wide, then burst into laughter. "Daddy, you'll get wet!" "No, that's the point," Alexander said, chasing after him clumsily. The boy squealed and darted away, Maya laughing as she tried to keep up. Soon all three were soaked, the umbrella abandoned, their laughter rising into the gray sky. That night, when Maxwell fell asleep faster than ever, Maya tucked him in with her usual care. Alexander lingered in the doorway. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" she asked. "For today? For yesterday? For everything." He hesitated, then added, "I don't say this often, but I was wrong about you. You're not just his nanny, you're—" He stopped himself, swallowing the words. "You matter. To him and to me." Maya felt her chest tighten, but she kept her voice steady. "Then don't forget it, Mr. Reed, because the moment you do, he'll feel it." As she left the room, Alexander stayed by his son's bed a little longer. He brushed the hair from Maxwell's forehead. The boy slept soundly, his breathing steady. For the first time since Rebecca's death, Alexander whispered into the quiet, "I'll try, I promise." And though no one answered, the silence felt less empty than before. It felt, just barely, like the beginning of something new. Tuesday arrived with a bright sky and the smell of freshly cut grass drifting across the Reed estate. It had been Maxwell's idea the night before, whispered with sleepy conviction as Maya tucked him in. "Can we make Mommy's spaghetti tomorrow?" She had promised, and promises to children, especially grieving ones, carried a weight heavier than steel. By late morning, the kitchen was alive in a way it hadn't been in months. Pots clattered, water boiled, flour dusted the counters, and tomato sauce simmered, low on the stove. Maxwell stood on a wooden stool, apron crooked around his tiny frame, wielding a wooden spoon like a scepter. "You're a natural chef," Maya said with mock seriousness. "I'm going to open a restaurant one day," Maxwell declared, proudly. "It'll be called Sheriff Max's Spaghetti Palace." Maya laughed. "Sounds like a place I'd eat every day." The sound of footsteps made them both turn. Alexander stood in the doorway, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up, as though debating whether to step in. His expression softened when he saw his son, cheeks flushed with excitement. "What's going on? Here?" he asked, his voice lower than usual. Curious, not critical. "Spaghetti Tuesday," Maxwell announced. "Mommy used to make it, but now we are." The words landed in Alexander's chest like a stone. For a moment, his composure cracked, but he quickly masked it. "I see," he said, walking closer. He glanced at Maya. "Need any help?" "Yes," Maxwell answered before Maya could. You can chop things, but careful, Daddy. Miss Maya says knives are dangerous. Alexander smiled faintly and took a cutting board. For the first time in years, the three of them moved around the kitchen together. Maxwell gave instructions in his little authoritative voice. Maya corrected him gently when he added too much salt. Alexander followed along with surprising patience. Slowly, the sterile silence of the mansion gave way to warmth, steam rising, laughter spilling, the smell of garlic filling every corner. When the spaghetti was finally ready, they sat at the long dining table, but instead of spreading out at opposite ends, they gathered close. 3 plates side by side. Maxwell slurped noodles noisily, sauce smeared across his chin. Maya dabbed his face with a napkin, and he grinned before turning to his father. Daddy, it tastes almost like Mommy's. Alexander's fork stilled. He looked at his son, then at Maya, and nodded. It's good, he said quietly. Really good. Dinner ended with Maxwell yawning wide, the weight of the day pulling him towards sleep. Maya carried him upstairs, Alexander following silently as she tucked him in. Can we do Spaghetti Tuesdays every week? The boy murmured drowsily. Yes, sweetheart, Maya whispered. Every week. After Maxwell drifted off, Alexander lingered at the door. He hasn't been that happy in a long time, he admitted. Maya smiled softly. Children don't need grand gestures. They just need presence, routine, something to count on. He studied her for a moment, then nodded and stepped back, though his eyes lingered longer than they should have. Later that night, Alexander found himself in the study again, staring into the fire. The taste of spaghetti lingered faintly, but stronger than that was the memory of his son's laughter, genuine, deep, from the belly. He hadn't heard it in months. He hadn't realized how much he missed it until it came back. He thought of Rebecca, how she used to hum while stirring sauce, how she made their cavernous house feel alive. He thought of Maxwell's little voice calling for Maya during nightmares. He thought of the letter in his drawer, its words echoing his own fears. The door creaked. Maya stepped in, holding a folded blanket. Maxwell kicked this off while he slept, she said. I thought you'd want to put it back on him. Alexander took the blanket, his fingers brushing hers briefly. Thank you, he said. She hesitated. You don't have to carry all of this alone, Mr. Reed. His jaw tightened. I don't know how to do it any other way. Then maybe it's time to learn. Her voice was gentle but steady. She held his gaze for a beat, then excused herself. That night, Alexander placed the blanket carefully over Maxwell. The boy stirred, mumbled something, and curled tighter. Watching him, Alexander whispered into the dark. I'm still here, buddy. I won't leave. In the days that followed, small shifts began to take root. Alexander had breakfast with them instead of rushing out with coffee. Maxwell's nightmares lessened as Maya taught him breathing exercises at bedtime. Alexander, though, awkward, began sitting with them in the garden while Maxwell played. The silence between him and Maya grew companionable, no longer tense. Yet beneath the fragile peace, cracks remained. One evening, Alexander took a call in the foyer, his voice low and harsh. Behind the staircase, Maxwell hid, overhearing fragments. Unstable. Scandal. Keep her in line. The boy's eyes widened. He didn't fully understand, but he knew the words were about Maya. At dinner, Maxwell was unusually quiet. When Maya asked what was wrong, he shook his head, stabbing at his pasta without eating. Later, as she tucked him in, he whispered, Daddy said someone wants to take you away. Is it true? Maya froze. She smoothed his hair. No one can take me away from you, Max. Not unless I choose to go. He looked up at her, eyes wet. Don't choose that, please. Her chest tightened. I won't. When she left the room, she found Alexander waiting in the hall. His face was unreadable. He heard you, she said flatly. Alexander sighed. I didn't want him to, but he did, Maya replied. And now he's afraid again. If you can't protect him from your world, then at least don't make him doubt the people who love him. He didn't answer. But that night, long after the house was quiet, Alexander sat in the dark, turning her words over like stones in his hand. The next morning, Maxwell woke to the smell of pancakes, something Alexander hadn't made in years. At the table, he said awkwardly, I'll handle my business, Max. And Ma's not going anywhere. Maxwell looked at Maya, then back at his father. For the first time in weeks, he smiled with both relief and trust. Maya met Alexander's eyes, across the table. No words passed between them, but something unspoken did. A fragile truce, a silent vow. And though grief still shadowed the house, a new rhythm had begun to beat. Tentative, uncertain, but alive. Saturday mornings at the Reed estate were usually quiet, filled with the muted hum of household staff and the soft clatter of dishes from the kitchen. But this Saturday was different. Maxwell was sprawled on the carpet with building blocks, constructing what he called the tallest tower in California, while Maya sat nearby, sipping coffee and offering the occasional, "That looks strong," or "Try putting the wide piece at the bottom." The air carried a rare lightness, a reprieve from months of gloom. Alexander entered the room, a stack of newspapers tucked under his arm. He watched for a moment, the sight of his son's unrestrained joy tugging at something deep inside him. He cleared his throat and Maxwell's head shot up. "Daddy, look, I made a tower bigger than you," Maxwell declared, standing beside his structure, arms spread wide for emphasis. Alexander chuckled softly. "Almost, Sheriff. Give it a few more blocks." His eyes flicked to Maya, who gave him a small, acknowledging nod. The moment was interrupted by the sharp sound of the doorbell. The butler answered, and seconds later, a familiar voice cut through the calm like ice breaking over water. "Where's my nephew?" Maya's spine stiffened. Alexander's expression hardened. Into the room swept Victoria Hale, Rebecca's younger sister. Elegant, poised, and sharp-eyed, she carried herself like she owned the air around her. She wore a cream coat over a fitted dress, her heels clicking against the floor as though punctuating her disapproval with each step. "Victoria," Alexander greeted curtly, "this is a surprise." "Hardly," she replied. Her gaze swept the room, landing on Maxwell first, then narrowing at Maya. "I couldn't stay away any longer. My sister's memory deserves more than this circus." Maxwell's smile faded. "Aunt Victoria?" he mumbled, stepping closer to Maya. Victoria crouched, forcing a sweet smile as she extended her arms. "Come give your aunt a hug, darling." Maxwell hesitated, his small fingers gripping the hem of Maya's blouse. "I'm busy," he said quietly. Victoria's smile faltered. She straightened, her eyes sharp as glass. "So this is how it is now? He clings to the help like she's family." Alexander's jaw clenched. "Enough. Maya is here because she cares for him. She's earned her place." "Earned?" Victoria snapped, turning on him. "She's a maid who got lucky. Do you think society won't notice what's happening here? A grieving widower, a vulnerable child, and a stranger from nowhere taking advantage." Maya drew in a slow breath. "With respect, Miss Hale, I'm here because your nephew needs stability. He needs love. If you can't see that, then perhaps you don't understand him at all." Victoria's eyes widened at the audacity. "You dare lecture me?" "Stop," Alexander interjected sharply. "You came here uninvited. Don't stand in my home and insult the woman who saved my son's life." Maxwell tugged at Maya's sleeve. "Can we go outside?" he whispered. Maya nodded, guiding him toward the back garden. She could feel Victoria's glare burning into her back with every step. Outside, the winter sun was pale but warm enough for Maxwell to chase a ball across the lawn. Maya stood near the patio, arms folded, mind racing. She had expected disapproval from family. Many wealthy families treated help as disposable, but the venom in Victoria's voice carried something deeper, something dangerous. A few minutes later, Alexander joined them, his expression stormy. "I told her to leave. She didn't take it." "Well," Maya kept her voice steady. "She thinks I'm trying to replace Rebecca. She's wrong." His tone was clipped. "She's not going to give up. She believes she knows what's best for Max." Maxwell's laughter rang out as he kicked the ball. "Daddy, catch!" he shouted. Alexander bent down, catching it awkwardly before sending it rolling back. His smile was fleeting, fading as quickly as it came. Later that evening, after Maxwell was asleep, Alexander poured himself a drink in the study. Maya appeared at the doorway, hesitant. "Do you want to talk about it?" He looked up, his eyes tired. "What's there to say? Victoria thinks I'm weak, that I've lost control. Maybe she's right." Maya stepped into the room. "You're not weak. You're grieving. And you're trying. That's more than most would do." His gaze lingered on her. "She'll try to paint you as an opportunist. She'll dig into your past, twist it until it suits her story." Maya's chest tightened. Memories of hospital bills, collection notices, and the night she lost her daughter flickered like cruel ghosts. "I have nothing to hide," she said quietly. "But that doesn't mean she won't try to shame me." Alexander set his glass down with a sharp clink. "I won't let her." Silence stretched between them, heavy but not hostile. Finally, Maya said, "Then fight for him, Alexander. Not against her, not against me. Fight for Maxwell, because that little boy deserves to feel safe, no matter who walks through that door." The words struck something in him. He looked away, but not before she saw the flicker of resolve. The following morning, Victoria returned, this time with legal documents in hand. She confronted Alexander in the foyer, her voice cold and cutting. "If you won't see reason, the court will. I'll petition for guardianship if I must. No." Alexander's voice was steady, but steel laced every word. "You'll fail. Maxwell belongs with me and with Maya." Victoria's eyes narrowed, her lips curling into a thin smile. "We'll see." As she swept out, the echo of her heels lingered, in the air like a warning shot. From the staircase above, Maya had watched the exchange silently, her stomach twisting. When she met Alexander's gaze afterward, she saw not defeat, but determination. For the first time, he wasn't retreating into grief. He was preparing for battle, and deep down, she realized this wasn't just about saving Maxwell anymore. It was about saving themselves. That night, as the boy slept peacefully, clutching his cowboy hat, Alexander stood at his bedroom door, whispering, "Into the quiet. I won't let anyone take you away." Maya, watching from the hallway, folded her arms tightly. She believed him, yet she knew the storm was only beginning. The week after Victoria's visit carried a heaviness that settled over the Reed estate like a gray cloud. Even Maxwell seemed to sense it. He played more quietly, clung to Maya's hand when strangers came near, and asked questions no 5-year-old should ever have to ask. "Are they going to take me away, Miss Maya? Like Mommy?" Each time, Maya would. Neil smooth his hair and reassure him. "No one's taking you anywhere, sweetheart. You're safe here." But each time she felt less certain. Alexander spent long hours on the phone with lawyers, his voice low but clipped, his footsteps echoing in the halls. He emerged only for meals, where he tried awkwardly to engage Maxwell in conversation. "What? Did you build today, champ?" Or, "How was the garden?" But his son answered in short, cautious bursts, as though afraid to say the wrong thing. The looming threat of Victoria's petition for guardianship had stolen the fragile peace they had begun to build. One evening, as dusk painted the sky orange and purple, Maya took Maxwell for a walk around the estate grounds. The boy's cowboy hat bobbed as he skipped ahead, his laughter soft but fleeting. They reached the pond, the same one where he'd nearly fallen weeks before. Maxwell crouched near the water's edge, tossing pebbles and watching the ripples. "Spread. Miss Maya," he said suddenly. "Why does Aunt Victoria hate you?" The question stung, though his tone was innocent. She knelt beside him. "Sometimes people don't understand each other, Max. And when they don't understand, they get scared. Scared people can act unkind." "But you're nice," he said, frowning. "You make spaghetti and read stories. Mommy would have liked you." Her throat tightened. "Thank you, sweetheart." Behind them, Alexander's voice broke the quiet. "Dinner's ready." He had come looking for them. His suit jacket was discarded, his tie loose. He watched Maxwell dash ahead toward the house before turning to Maya. "He talks about you like you've always been here." Maya stood, brushing dirt from her skirt. "Children don't measure time the way we do. They measure presence. I'm here, so he feels it." Alexander's gaze lingered on her, heavy with unspoken things. Then he exhaled sharply. "Victoria is already filing paperwork. She wants an emergency hearing to question my fitness as a father." Maya's stomach dropped. "On what grounds?" "That I'm neglectful. That grief has made me unstable, and she'll use your presence as evidence, claiming you're influencing him, filling a role that isn't yours." Maya crossed her arms. "And what will you say?" "I'll say the truth," he answered. "That without you, he'd be lost." She searched his face, looking for hesitation, but found none. Still, fear gnawed at her. "They'll dig into my past, Alexander. Into Laya, into debts, into mistakes I made when I was desperate. They'll paint me as unfit, and they'll drag you down with me." "Me?" He stepped closer, his voice low but resolute. "Then let them. I won't let anyone rewrite what you've done for us." The next morning, the house bustled with tension. Alexander's attorney arrived, a stern woman named Evelyn Price, who wore a dark blazer and carried a stack of files. She sat with Alexander and Maya at the long dining table, her eyes sharp. "Victoria's strategy is simple," Evelyn explained. "She'll argue that Alexander is emotionally compromised, that he has delegated parental responsibility to a domestic employee with no formal qualifications. She'll push for temporary guardianship under her care until you're deemed fit." Maya's stomach twisted. "So, what happens to Max?" "He'd live with her," Evelyn said matter-of-factly. "At least until the court decides otherwise." Alexander slammed a hand against the table. "Over my dead body." Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "Emotion won't win this. Evidence will. We need to prove stability, a healthy environment, structure." She turned to Maya. "Which means you need to be careful. No arguments in public. No rash decisions. You will be scrutinized." Maya nodded, though her pulse raced. She thought of Maxwell's drawings of the three of them holding hands beneath the sun. Was that stability? Or would the court see only impropriety? That night, after Maxwell was asleep, Alexander found Maya in the kitchen drying dishes. "He'll ask you questions tomorrow," Alexander said, leaning against the counter. "The lawyer wants to prepare us for court." "I'll answer," she said quietly. "I'll do whatever it takes." He studied her. "You're not alone in this, Maya." She met his eyes. For a fleeting moment, the walls between them cracked. She wanted to believe him, but she knew the cost of hope. The following day, Evelyn sat across from Maya in the sitting room, notebook open. "Why are you here, Miss Williams?" she asked, pen poised. Maya folded her hands. "Because Maxwell needed me. Because his father needed me, even if he didn't realize it." Evelyn tilted her head. "Do you love the boy?" "Yes," Maya said without hesitation. "As if he were my own." "And do you love his father?" The question caught her off guard. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Before she could answer, Alexander's voice cut in from the doorway. That's irrelevant, but Maya saw the way Evelyn's eyes narrowed, the way she scribbled something down. That evening, Maxwell padded into Maya's room with his stuffed bear. Miss Maya, if Aunt Victoria takes me away, will you still come find me? Her heart broke. She gathered him close, kissing his curls. No one is taking you away, Max. Not while I'm here. Not while your daddy's here. No. From the hallway, Alexander watched, the weight of guilt pressing down harder than ever. He realized in that moment that he had drawn a line in the sand, and there would be no going back. As the boy drifted to sleep in Maya's arms, Alexander whispered to himself, "They'll have to go through me first." The storm Victoria had promised was coming, and the Reed estate, for all its walls and wealth, would soon be tested in ways it had never been before. The air in the estate felt different after Evelyn Price's visit, though nothing visible had changed. Maya sensed the tension in every corner of the house. Staff members whispered more quietly, as if the very walls might betray them. Maxwell, who once darted down hallways with carefree laughter, now watched the adults with wary curiosity. He didn't understand court filings or legal guardianship, but he understood when grown-ups were worried. Children always did. On a rainy Wednesday afternoon, Maya escorted Maxwell to his playroom. He lined up his toy soldiers on the rug, his small hands steady, but his face unusually solemn. She sat cross-legged nearby, folding laundry as he played. After a long silence, he spoke without looking up. "Miss Maya, do you think Daddy's scared?" Her hand stilled over his shirt. "Why do you ask that, Max?" "Because he paces a lot. He doesn't talk when he's pacing. Mama used to say he only did that when work was bad." Maya chose her words carefully. "Your daddy's worried. Grown-ups get scared too, even if they don't say it out loud. But scared doesn't mean weak. It just means he loves you enough to fight." Maxwell chewed his lip, then looked up. "Then I'm not scared either. Because if he's fighting and you're here, we're safe." Her chest tightened. She wanted to promise safety as if it were something she could guarantee, like a bedtime story or a bowl of spaghetti. But she knew better. Safety was fragile, easily shattered by the likes of Victoria and the people who fed her ambition. That evening, when Maxwell was asleep, Alexander summoned Maya to the study. His tie was gone, his sleeves rolled up, his hair slightly disheveled, a rare sight for a man who always wore armor in the form of pressed suits. Papers were scattered across his desk, legal documents mixed with newspaper clippings. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the chair opposite. Maya obeyed, her pulse quickening. "They're digging," Alexander began flatly. "Victoria's hired investigators. They're combing through your past. Debts, jobs, medical records, even Laya." The name of her daughter cut through her like glass. She steadied her breath. "I knew she would. She'll use anything to make me look unfit." Alexander's jaw tightened. "She already has a file. Evelyn intercepted some of it. They're framing you as irresponsible, unstable, a single mother who lost her child because she couldn't provide adequate care." Maya flinched, anger and sorrow surging together. "That's a lie." "I know," Alexander said firmly. "But lies don't matter in court if they sound convincing." For a long moment, neither spoke. Rain battered against the windows. Finally, Maya asked, "And what about you? What will they say? That I'm reckless? That I left my son in the care of a grieving stranger instead of family?" His eyes, dark and tired, met hers. "They'll twist everything good you've done into negligence on my part." Maya clenched her hands in her lap. "Then why keep me here? Why not send me away until this is over?" The silence stretched until Alexander leaned forward, his voice low and deliberate. "Because without you, he'll crumble. And so will I. The words lodged in her heart, unshakable. But before she could reply, a knock at the door interrupted them. It was the butler, pale-faced. "Sir, the press is outside." Alexander's expression hardened. He rose and moved to the window. Camera flashes lit the gates in the distance. Reporters shouted questions into the rain, their umbrellas bobbing. Like black crows, Maya joined him, her throat dry. "They already know." "Yes," Alexander said grimly, "and they'll spin their own stories before we ever get a chance to speak." The next day's headlines proved him right. Tech mogul's grief opens door to nanny's influence. From maid to mother, who really raises the Reed heir? Tabloids reveled in speculation, painting Maya as a manipulative opportunist. Photos of her, entering and leaving the estate, were splashed across glossy pages, her face shadowed as though she were a villain. At breakfast, Maxwell flipped through the discarded paper on the counter. He read aloud, stumbling over the words. "Miss William, seducing daddy." His eyes widened. What does that mean? Alexander snatched the paper away, cursing under his breath. It means people write lies when they don't know the truth. "But why would they lie about Miss Maya?" Maxwell demanded, his eyes brimming with confusion. "She saved me." Mia crouched beside him, brushing his cheek. "Sometimes people don't like when families look different than they expect, Max. But the truth is what you know, not what they print." The boy's small face hardened with surprising resolve. "Then I'll tell them. I'll tell everyone you saved me." Her heart cracked. "No, sweetheart, that's not your fight." Alexander's gaze softened on his son, then shifted to Maya. "It's ours." That afternoon, Alexander met with Evelyn again. Maya was asked to sit in to prepare for questioning. Evelyn's tone was sharp, pure business. "Victoria will argue that you've blurred boundaries, that you've replaced Rebecca in ways unhealthy for the child. When asked, you must stay calm. No emotional outbursts, no personal attacks. Do you understand?" Maya nodded, though her hands trembled. Evelyn continued. "They'll also drag Laya into this. I'm sorry. You'll need to speak about it openly or they'll twist the silence into guilt." Maya's breath caught, but she lifted her chin. "Then I'll tell them the truth. She died because of a heart defect, not neglect. And if loving her until her last breath makes me unfit, then so be it." Alexander's eyes lingered on her, full of unspoken admiration, sorrow, perhaps even something deeper. But the moment passed as Evelyn snapped her notebook shut. "Good. Court in 2 weeks. Be ready." That night, Maya tucked Maxwell into bed. With his stuffed bear, he clung to her hand, whispering, "If they try to take me, will you still hold on?" Tears burned her eyes, but she smiled. "I will never let go, Max. No." From the hallway, Alexander listened, the promise etching itself into his bones. Later, as he stood at the window watching reporters camped outside his gates, he murmured, into the darkness, "Neither will I." But even as he spoke, he knew Victoria's storm was gathering, and the whispers around them, half-truths, shadows, lies, were only the beginning of a battle that would test them all. The Reed estate was unusually alive that Friday evening. For the first time in months, Alexander had agreed to host a small dinner with 2 of his longest-standing business associates. He insisted it was not about appearances, though Maya knew appearances mattered now more than ever. With Victoria's whispers turning into public accusations, Evelyn had advised him to show stability, normalcy, control. A simple dinner was the first step. Maxwell had begged to join. "Please, Daddy, I'll sit still. I'll eat all my vegetables." His pleading eyes softened even Alexander's stern resolve, and he relented. "Fine, but you sit next to Miss Maya, and you behave." The long mahogany table gleamed with crystal glasses and polished silverware. Candles flickered against the marble walls. Maya sat at Maxwell's side, dressed simply but neatly, her uniform crisp. Alexander, seated at the head of the table, carried himself with quiet authority. To the casual eye, they looked like a family dining together. Mr. and Mrs. Dalton, long time. Investors in Alexander's company, chatted politely about markets and politics. Maxwell fidgeted with his napkin until Maya whispered, "Fold it into a boat." He grinned and followed her instructions, the tension in his small shoulders easing. The conversation flowed smoothly until dessert arrived, chocolate souffle, Maxwell's favorite. He had just taken his first bite when a loud commotion erupted. In the foyer, the butler appeared in the doorway, pale and uneasy. "Sir, Miss Victoria is here." Every muscle in Alexander's jaw tightened. "Now?" "Yes, sir. She insists. Says it's urgent." Before he could respond, Victoria swept into the dining room uninvited, her heels clicking like gunfire. She wore a dark green dress and a smile sharp enough to cut glass. "Alexander?" she purred. "How quaint. Playing house while the world watches you unravel." The Daltons exchanged nervous glances. Maya placed a steadying hand on Maxwell's back. The boy shrank against her, his fork clattering onto his plate. "Victoria," Alexander said icily, "this is not the time." "Oh, but it is." She pulled a folder from her clutch and slapped it onto the table in front of him. "The petition has been filed. In 2 weeks you'll stand before a judge. And when you do, the world will know exactly what you've let into your home." Her eyes slid toward Maya, dripping with disdain. "A replacement for my sister. A fraud in a maid's apron." Maxwell jumped to his feet. "Don't talk about her like that," he shouted, his small fists trembling. "Maxwell," Alexander said, rising quickly, but the boy's voice cut through the room like lightning. "She saved me. When I almost fell in the pond, she saved me. When I have bad dreams, she makes them go away. You don't know anything, Aunt Victoria." The room fell silent. Mr. Dalton cleared his throat awkwardly. Mrs. Dalton looked away, embarrassed. Victoria's painted smile faltered for a fraction of a second before returning sharper than ever. "Oh, how touching," she sneered. "He's been coached well." Maya rose slowly, her voice calm but firm. "No one coached him. He speaks the truth." Victoria's gaze snapped to her. "You should know your place, Miss William. This estate isn't yours. This child isn't yours. And in time, the court will make that clear." Alexander stepped between them, his presence commanding enough to silence the room. "You don't speak to her. You don't speak to my son. You came here to make a scene, and you've succeeded. Now leave." For a moment, Victoria's mask slipped. Anger flashed in her eyes, raw and unrestrained. But she quickly composed herself, snapping the folder shut and tucking it under her arm. "Very well. Enjoy your little dinner, Alexander. Enjoy your little fantasy family. It won't last." She turned on her heel and swept out, her perfume lingering like smoke after a fire. The Daltons excused themselves soon after, mumbling polite farewells, clearly eager to escape the tension. The house fell quiet again, though the echoes of the confrontation lingered in the air. Maxwell climbed into Mia's lap, pressing his face into her shoulder. "She hates me," he whispered. "No, Max," Mia soothed, stroking his back. "She doesn't hate you. She's just angry. But you are not to blame for that." Alexander stood at the window, fists clenched at his sides. "This is only the beginning," he said darkly. "She'll use every trick, every connection to rip him away from me, and she'll use you as the weapon." Maya looked up, meeting his gaze over Maxwell's head. "Then you'll need to decide, Alexander. Not just to defend yourself, but to stand for him, to show them you're not broken, that this home isn't broken." For a long moment, the only sound was the rain beginning to patter against the glass. Then Alexander turned, his voice quieter but resolute. "She wants to paint you as a liability. I'll make sure the world sees you for what you are. The reason my son still laughs." Later that night, after Maxwell had finally fallen asleep, clinging to his stuffed bear, Maya lingered in the hallway outside his room. Alexander approached silently, the lines of exhaustion etched into his face. "You were brave tonight," he said softly. "I was only telling the truth," she replied. He studied her for a long moment. "The truth isn't always enough," he murmured. But tonight it mattered. Maya held his gaze, feeling the weight of unspoken things between them. Then she nodded. "We'll face what comes together." Alexander exhaled slowly, as though releasing a burden he had carried too long. "Together," he echoed. Downstairs, the candles from dinner still flickered faintly, their wax melting into quiet pools. The house had been shaken, but it stood firm, a fragile fortress against the storm gathering outside. And in the silence of that night, Maya realized something she had tried to deny. She was no longer just a caretaker. She was the anchor holding them both steady. But she also knew anchors could be dragged down if the storm was strong enough. And Victoria's storm was only beginning. The morning after Victoria's intrusion, the Reed estate carried the aftershocks like an unhealed wound. Staff moved quietly, avoiding eye contact, and the butler carried the newspaper into the study with visible reluctance. The headline screamed across the front page, "Family Feud. At Reed Mansion, widower's sister-in-law confronts mysterious nanny." Beneath the title, grainy photos of Maya holding Maxwell's hand at the dinner table filled the frame, captured through the iron gates by a long-lens camera. Alexander skimmed the article, his jaw tightening with each paragraph. They called him distracted, reckless, a grieving man manipulated by a young employee. They painted Maya as an interloper, a schemer, a poor woman who had infiltrated the Reed estate. The worst part was the mention of Maxwell, described as a vulnerable pawn in a game of power. When Maya entered the study carrying fresh coffee, she stopped short at the sight of the paper spread open on his desk. "They're already spinning it." Alexander's eyes lifted to hers, full of storm. "They've spun worse." She set the tray down, her hands steady though her chest burned. "If you want me to step back, no." He cut in sharply, then softer. "No. That's exactly what she wants. Victoria wants to isolate me, to make it look like I can't manage without her approval. You're not the problem, Maya. You're the proof she's wrong." Before she could reply, a shrill ringtone shattered the silence. Alexander answered briskly. It was Evelyn. Maya could only hear his half of the conversation. Clipped words, restrained, anger. Finally, he ended the call and turned back. "They've scheduled a deposition. Victoria's lawyers want to question you." Maya's stomach dropped. "Me? They'll ask about your role here, about Max, about your past." He hesitated, his eyes searching hers. "And about Laya." The name hit her like a fist. She had expected it, but hearing it aloud still cut deep. "If I tell the truth, they'll twist it," she whispered. Alexander came around the desk, his voice firm. "Then tell it anyway. Don't give them the silence they want. Silence is what they'll use against us." That afternoon, Evelyn arrived at the estate to prepare her. They sat in the sitting room, Evelyn's legal pad open on her lap, Alexander standing by the window with his arms folded. "They'll push you," Evelyn warned, her voice crisp. "They'll frame every answer to suggest you're overstepping. Stay calm. Stay factual. Do not let them provoke you into defending your dignity. That's what they want, to make you look unstable." Maya nodded, though her pulse raced. Evelyn leaned forward. "Let's start. Why are you employed here?" Maya clasped her hands tightly in her lap. "Because Mr. Reed's son needed care, and I was asked to provide it." "Be specific." "Because Maxwell lost his mother, because he was grieving, because someone had to be present when grief made it hard for others to be." Evelyn's sharp eyes flicked up. "Good. But add this. You were hired as staff. and your duties expanded naturally due to the child's needs. Make it clear this wasn't self-imposed. Maya nodded again, repeating the phrasing until it felt natural. Then Evelyn shifted. Now they'll move to Laya. They'll suggest negligence. How do you respond? Maya's throat closed. She forced herself to breathe. My daughter had a congenital heart defect. I worked 3 jobs to pay her medical bills. She died in my arms. At 7 years old. That wasn't neglect. That was love and loss. Evelyn studied her. Say it exactly like that. Without tears, if you can manage. Judges respect composure. Alexander turned from the window, his voice rough. Composure doesn't change truth. Courts don't deal in truth, Evelyn countered. They deal in perception. The session went on for nearly 2 hours. By the end, Maya's voice was strained, her body tense. She rose to leave, but Alexander stopped her at the doorway. You did well, he said quietly. I felt like I was on trial already, she admitted. You are, he replied, but you're not alone. That night, after Maxwell was asleep, Maya sat by her bedroom window, staring at the rain streaking the glass. She thought of Laya, her soft curls, her small hands, the way her daughter had whispered, "Don't cry, Mommy." Even as her little body failed, Maya pressed a hand to her chest, willing the ache to quiet. A soft knock startled her. Alexander stood at the door, no tie, his expression tired but intent. "Can I come in?" She hesitated, then nodded. He stepped inside, glancing around as though seeing her space for the first time. The modest dresser, the neatly folded blankets, the framed photo of Laya on the nightstand. He picked it up carefully. "She looks like you," he said softly. Maya's breath caught. "She was my whole world." He set the photo down gently, then turned to her. "Don't let Victoria use her memory as a weapon. Don't give her that power." Her eyes filled despite herself. "It's not easy to talk about her. Every word feels like losing her again." Alexander stepped closer, his voice low. "Then talk about her like she's still here. Because she is in you." For a moment, the silence between them was heavy with something unspoken, fragile, dangerous, real. But before it could deepen, Maya turned away, wiping her eyes. "You should rest. Tomorrow will be harder." He lingered, then nodded. "Good night, Maya." The next morning, the estate gates were swarmed with reporters again. As Alexander's car pulled away for a meeting, one shouted, "Mr. Reed, is it true your maid is replacing your late wife?" Alexander didn't answer, but his glare could have burned through steel. Inside, Maya pulled the curtains closed, shielding Maxwell from the chaos. The boy looked up at her, worried. "Why are they yelling about you, Miss Maya?" She knelt, forcing a smile. "Because sometimes people talk when they don't understand. But we know the truth, don't we?" He nodded solemnly. "You're my Miss Maya. That's the truth." Her chest ached with equal parts love and fear. She hugged him close, whispering a vow she wasn't sure she could keep. "And I always will be." But even as she said it, she knew the questions waiting in the deposition room would cut deeper than any headline, and the answers she gave might decide not only her fate, but Maxwell's too. The deposition was scheduled for a gray Thursday morning in a law office that seemed designed to intimidate. The building's marble lobby gleamed under harsh fluorescent lights, and the elevator carried Alexander, Maya, and Evelyn upward in silence. Maxwell had been left at home with a trusted member of staff, but Maya's heart ached as though she had abandoned him in enemy territory. She had dressed simply, her hair tied neatly, her uniform replaced by a modest navy dress Evelyn had insisted on. Respectable but unpretentious, the lawyer had instructed. Appearances matter. When the elevator doors slid open, They were greeted by a reception area lined with framed degrees and black and white cityscapes. A woman with sharp eyes and a sharper tone ushered them into a conference room. Inside, Victoria sat already, her posture immaculate, her smile thin. Beside her was a man in a pinstripe suit, her attorney. His eyes gleamed like he'd already won. "Mr. Reed," Victoria said smoothly, "so good of you to come. And Miss William, or should I say Miss Mother-in-Training?" Alexander ignored her, guiding Maya to her seat. Evelyn placed a hand briefly over Maya's before beginning. "We're here for questions, not insults." "Let's proceed," the attorney said, his voice even but laced with condescension. "Miss William, how long have you been employed?" "By Mr. Reed?" "7 months," Maya answered. "And what were your original duties? Housekeeping, cleaning, organizing, cooking when needed?" "At what point did those duties expand?" He leaned forward, emphasizing the word. "When Mrs. Reed passed away," Maya said carefully, "Maxwell needed more care. I began helping him with daily routines, playtime, and comfort during the night. Over time, Mr. Reed asked me to take on the role of nanny." The attorney scribbled something. "So, you are not professionally trained in child care?" "No," Maya admitted, keeping her voice steady. "But I am experienced. I raised my own daughter until her passing." Victoria's eyes glittered. "Ah, yes, Laya," she turned to the attorney. "Make sure that's on record." Maya's breath hitched, but Evelyn gave her a small nod. "Steady. Speak," the attorney continued. "Can you explain the circumstances of your daughter's death?" Maya swallowed hard. "Laya was born with a congenital heart defect. I worked multiple jobs to pay for her care. She underwent several surgeries. At age 7, her heart failed. She died in my arms." For the first time, the attorney hesitated, as if the stark truth had disrupted his rhythm. But he quickly recovered. "Would you say financial hardship contributed to her passing?" "No," Maya replied firmly. "I did everything in my power to provide for her. She had excellent doctors. Her death was not neglect, it was illness." Victoria smirked faintly, whispering something to her lawyer. He shifted tactics. "Since becoming more involved with Maxwell, do you discipline him?" "I guide him," Maya said. "Do you comfort him when he cries at night?" "Yes." "Do you prepare his meals, read to him, take him outside to play?" "Yes." The attorney leaned back with a satisfied smile. "So, in many ways, you have stepped into the role his late mother once held." Alexander spoke suddenly, his voice cutting like steel. "She stepped into the role because I asked her to. Because my son needed her." "Don't twist care into theft," Victoria scoffed. "Your judgment is compromised, Alexander. You've let grief blind you. You've allowed a woman with no qualifications, no stability, and a tragic past to become the center of my nephew's world. And when she leaves, and she will, he'll be shattered again." Maya's hands trembled under the table, but she forced her voice steady. "I have no intention of leaving Maxwell. I've given him stability, not taken it away." The attorney ignored her. "Miss Williams, are you romantically involved with Mr. Reed?" The question sliced through the room. Maya froze, stunned. Evelyn shot up. "Objection. Irrelevant." The attorney smirked. "Relevance speaks to influence. If she is romantically entangled with her employer, it calls her motives into question." Maya found her voice. "No, I am not." Her eyes flicked briefly toward Alexander, who sat stiff and silent, his jaw locked. The deposition dragged on for hours, each question designed to undermine, to twist. By the end, Maya felt hollowed out, as though every piece of her past had been turned into ammunition. When it was over, Evelyn guided them out swiftly, ignoring Victoria's triumphant smirk. Outside, the rain had begun again. Maya stood on the steps of the law office, her hands shaking. Alexander placed a hand on her shoulder. "You did well," he said quietly. It didn't feel like it, she whispered. They made me sound like a mistake waiting to happen. His voice hardened. Then we'll prove them wrong. Back at the estate, Maxwell ran to greet them, arms wrapping tightly around Maya's waist. You're back, he said, relief in his small voice. I missed you. Maya hugged him close, her throat burning. I missed you too, Sheriff Max. Later that night, as she tucked Maxwell into bed, he asked, Did Aunt Victoria yell at you? She smiled faintly. Not exactly. Good, he said, yawning, because you're my Miss Maya and nobody gets to take that away. When he drifted to sleep, Maya lingered, brushing his curls from his forehead. She stepped into the hall to find Alexander waiting. His eyes were shadowed but steady. They'll use today against us, he admitted. But they underestimated you. You didn't break. I wanted to, she confessed softly. He shook his head. You're stronger than you think, Maya. Their eyes held in the dim light, unspoken truths pressing close between them. Then Alexander stepped back, his voice quiet. Rest, Maya. We'll need all our strength for what's coming. And as she closed her door behind her, Maya knew he was right. The deposition had been only the first battle. The war for Maxwell's future, and perhaps their own, had only just begun. The house was unnervingly quiet the evening after the deposition. The staff moved like shadows, speaking in whispers as though sound itself might break the fragile balance of the Reed estate. Maxwell had fallen asleep early, exhausted by the tension he didn't fully understand, but could feel pressing in from every corner. Maya lingered in the hall outside his bedroom, listening to the rhythm of his breathing, steady and innocent, before finally retreating to her own room. Downstairs, Alexander sat in his study, a glass of untouched whiskey in front of him. Papers from Evelyn were spread across the desk. Court dates, outlines of questions to expect, potential witnesses. Victoria might call. His head ached from hours of reading, yet one line kept circling in his mind. Evelyn's warning, echoing like a curse. Perception wins, not truth. He glanced at the framed photograph of Rebecca that still occupied its place on the bookshelf. Her eyes, frozen in time, looked back at him with their familiar mixture of warmth and resolve. He whispered under his breath, Am I failing him? Failing both of you? The silence gave no answer, only deepened his doubt. It was then he noticed the envelope on the corner of the desk. Plain white, no name on the outside. He frowned and opened it, recognizing Maya's handwriting instantly. His breath caught as he read, Mr. Reed, I fear I've done more harm than good. Maxwell is stronger, yes, but he's also caught in a war he shouldn't have to fight. Every time Victoria speaks my name, I see the confusion in his eyes. Every time a reporter shouts questions at the gate, I see his shoulders tighten. I cannot bear to be the reason your son suffers more. If removing myself eases his burden, then I must do it. I will always love that boy as if he were my own. But sometimes love means stepping aside. I hope one day you'll understand. Maya Williams. The words blurred as Alexander's vision swam with fury and disbelief. He rose abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. No, he muttered. She can't. He strode down the hall, stopping at her door. He knocked sharply, then entered without waiting. Maya was seated on the edge of her bed, a small suitcase open at her feet. Her hands froze over the folded clothes as she looked up. You weren't supposed to find that until morning, she said, quietly. Morning? His voice was sharp. You were planning to leave in the night like some thief. I was planning to leave quietly, she corrected, her tone steady. For his sake. Alexander's hands curled into fists at his sides. Don't you dare pretend this is for him. You think abandoning him will help? You think ripping yourself away will heal him? Her eyes glistened, but her voice didn't waver. Every headline has my name. Every question points at me. He shouldn't have to defend me. He shouldn't have to carry the weight of proving I belong here. He doesn't carry it. I do, Alexander snapped. It's my responsibility, not his, not yours. Mine. She shook her head, closing the suitcase. And what if you lose? What if Victoria wins because of me? Then Maxwell loses everything. I won't let that happen. He stepped closer, his voice low and burning. You think leaving spares him? But it breaks him. I heard him last night begging you not to go. If they take him... Do you remember? Because I do. And if you disappear now, you'll prove every lie Victoria tells. That you're unreliable. That you'll run when it gets hard. Mia's lips trembled, her resolve faltering. I'm terrified, Alexander. I'm terrified that staying will cost him his father. He reached out suddenly, gripping her shoulders. His eyes were fierce, desperate. Then be terrified. But stay anyway, because that boy needs you. And so do I. The words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Maya's breath caught. For a moment, silence filled the room, broken only by the rain tapping against the window. Then she slowly sat back down, her hands shaking. Alexander exhaled, releasing her shoulders. He straightened, pulling a chair from the corner to sit opposite her. His voice softened. If you leave, you'll never forgive yourself, and neither will he. We'll fight this together. You, me, Evelyn. We'll fight her lies until there's nothing left. Maya looked at him for a long time, tears slipping down her cheeks despite her effort to hold them back. Finally, she nodded. All right, I'll stay. Relief washed over his face, though his eyes still carried the weight of a man preparing for battle. Good, because tomorrow we go public. Her brow furrowed. Public? Yes, he said firmly. Victoria is feeding the press her story. If we stay silent, she wins the narrative. It's time we tell ours. The next morning, Alexander summoned the staff to prepare the main parlor for a press statement. Cameras were arranged, journalists invited. Evelyn stood by his side, her notes precise. Maya stayed in the background at first, but Maxwell clung to her hand as the room filled with reporters. When Alexander stepped to the podium, flashes lit the air. His voice was calm but commanding. There has been much speculation about my family, about my judgment, about the woman standing behind me. Let me make this clear. Maya Williams is not a liability. She is not a stranger. She is the reason my son smiles again after losing his mother. She saved his life when he was in danger. She has given him stability when grief threatened to drown him. She is not replacing Rebecca. No one could. But she is giving my son the gift of laughter. And for that, I will defend her with everything I have. Reporters shouted questions, but Alexander raised a hand. Maxwell is my son. He will remain with me. And no court, no headline, no relative with ulterior motives will take him away. That is all. The room erupted in chaos, flashes exploding, voices overlapping. But in the midst of it, Maxwell tugged at Maya's sleeve and whispered proudly, Daddy told the truth. She smiled through tears, holding him close. For the first time in weeks, she felt something stir in her chest that resembled hope. Yet, as she scanned the crowd of reporters, she caught sight of Victoria standing in the back. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes were sharp as knives, and Maya knew the battle was far from over. The storm had only grown stronger. Day after the press conference, the estate was a hive of activity. Calls poured in from reporters demanding interviews, investors seeking reassurance, and even old acquaintances of Rebecca offering unsolicited opinions about Alexander's decision to defend Maya so publicly. The gates were crowded with journalists, microphones jutting forward like spears each time a car rolled out. But inside the estate, an unusual quiet filled the air. Maya busied herself in the kitchen preparing pancakes with Maxwell. The boy had flour smudged across his cheek. his small hands gripping the whisk like it was a sword. "I'm helping," he declared proudly, even though most of the batter had ended up on the counter. "Yes, you are, Sheriff Max," Maya replied with a chuckle, brushing flour from his hair. She glanced toward the doorway and found Alexander standing there, tie undone, his gaze softer than she had ever seen. For a brief moment, she wondered how strange it must feel for him to see his son smile again, not because of wealth or toys, but because of something as simple as pancakes. After breakfast, Alexander called Maya into the study. Papers littered the desk, but his tone was calmer than usual. "I've been thinking," he said. "We can't just play defense. If we only react to Victoria, we'll always be a step behind. We need to show strength, purpose, something bigger than her accusations." Maya frowned slightly. "And how do we do that?" He slid a folder toward her. Inside was a proposal. The Second Chance Foundation, a charity aimed at supporting single parents and children who had lost family members. There were pages of draft admissions, potential partners, even a logo design. Her breath caught. "You want to start this now?" "Yes," he said firmly. "Now. Because this fight isn't just about Maxwell or me. It's about families like yours, families who fall through the cracks because society doesn't value them until they're gone. If we make this public, if we launch it before the hearing, it reframes the story. Maya Williams isn't just the nanny under fire. She's the co-founder of a foundation that gives kids hope." Maya blinked, overwhelmed. "Alexander, this could change everything, or make it worse. They'll say you're using charity as a shield." "Let them," he countered. "I'd rather be accused of doing good than sit silent while Victoria writes our story for us." For the first time in days, Maya allowed herself to smile. Not wide, but real. "And you'd put my name on this?" "Not just your name," Alexander said, his voice softer. "Your story. People need to know about Leia, about how you fought for her, about how love doesn't end with loss." Her eyes stung. She swallowed hard and nodded. "Then let's do it, Alexander." By afternoon, the estate was filled with a different kind of noise. PR consultants, legal advisors, and volunteers brainstorming launch strategies. Evelyn raised her eyebrows when she saw the plans, but didn't object. "It's risky," she admitted, "but it's clever." It put them on edge for the first time. Maxwell, of course, was thrilled. "Does this mean other kids like me can have Spaghetti Tuesdays too?" he asked innocently. Maya laughed through tears and hugged him. "Something like that, sweetheart." The official announcement came 3 days later. In the same parlor where Alexander had given his first statement, he now stood beside Maya. Maxwell perched between them. Cameras flashed, but this time the air felt different, less like a battlefield, more like a stage. Alexander's voice was steady as he addressed the press. "This is not just about my family. It's about every family fractured by loss, every parent who has been told they aren't enough. The Second Chance Foundation will provide support, counseling, and resources for single parents and children grieving the loss of a loved one. And it exists because of one woman, Maya Williams." He stepped aside slightly, gesturing toward her. Maya's knees trembled, but Maxwell squeezed her hand. She stepped up to the podium, her voice wavering at first, then gaining strength. "I never expected to be standing here. I'm not a doctor or a politician or anyone important. I'm just a mother who once held her child as she slipped away. I know what it feels like to be powerless, to feel like the world doesn't see your struggle. This foundation is for those parents, for those children, to remind them they are not forgotten." The room fell silent for a moment before questions erupted. "Miss Williams, is this an attempt to clean your image before the custody hearing? Mr. Reed, are you admitting you cannot manage your family without Miss Williams?" Alexander raised a hand. "This is not about image. This is about people who need help. If you want to spin it, go ahead, but the work will speak louder than any headline." The launch made waves. Some outlets dismissed it as a publicity stunt. But others praised the initiative, noting how personal Maya's speech had been. Donations trickled in almost immediately, many from parents who had lost children of their own. But Victoria was not silent. The very next morning, she appeared. On a talk show, dressed in black as though in perpetual mourning for her sister. Her voice was smooth, her words sharp. This so-called foundation is nothing more than a smokescreen. My late sister would be horrified to see her son paraded around as a prop for pity. Alexander is a grieving man manipulated by a woman who knows how to play the victim. I will not stand by while my nephew is raised in chaos. Her words cut like knives when replayed on the estate television. Why does Aunt Victoria hate us? Maxwell asked, frowning. Maya knelt, pulling him close. She doesn't hate you, Max. She just doesn't understand. But Daddy and I will make sure she can't hurt you. Alexander stood in the doorway, his face hard. She's declared war, he muttered. That evening, Evelyn gathered them in the study. Victoria is playing her strongest card now, public sympathy. She'll use your late wife's memory as a weapon. We need to be ready for the hearing. They'll push hard on Maya's past, on her place in this house. They'll paint this foundation as exploitation, and we'll need to counter every word. Maya looked down at her hands. And if I fail, Alexander shook his head firmly. You won't, because the truth is on our side. And this time, we're not just surviving. We're building something bigger than her lies. Later that night, when the estate was quiet, Maya sat alone at her window, watching the lights of reporters' vans flicker at the gates. Her mind swirled with doubt and fear, but also with something she hadn't felt in a long time: purpose. She thought of Laya. She thought of Maxwell's smile when he said, "We're safe." She thought of Alexander's voice when he said, "So do I." The storm outside was louder now, but inside her heart something steadier had begun to grow, a determination that no court, no smear, no lie could shake. For the first time, Maya believed she wasn't just surviving this battle. She was ready to fight it, for Maxwell, for Leia, for herself, and maybe, just maybe, for Alexander too. The courthouse steps were swarmed with cameras the morning of the preliminary hearing. Reporters shouted Alexander's name. Microphones thrust forward, flashes ignited like lightning strikes. Security guards formed a line to hold the crowd back, but the noise was relentless. Mr. Reed, do you believe Miss William is exploiting you? Is it true your sister-in-law has evidence of negligence? Miss William, are you prepared to testify about your daughter? Maya gripped her purse strap tightly as they ascended the steps. Maxwell wasn't with them. He was safely at the estate under staff care, but his absence made Maya feel strangely hollow, as though a piece of her courage was missing. Alexander walked beside her, his hand brushing hers lightly, an anchor amid the chaos. Evelyn strode ahead, her heels clicking decisively. Inside, the courtroom was cooler but no less tense. High ceilings, polished wood benches, and the sharp eyes of the judge gave the room an air of gravity. Victoria sat across the aisle with her attorney, posture impeccable, her black dress chosen carefully to project solemnity. In her lap, she held a framed photo of Rebecca, resting it against the table like a silent weapon. The opening arguments began. Victoria's attorney stood, voice calm and confident. Your Honor, this case is not about wealth or power. It is about a child, my client's nephew, being raised in an environment that is unstable, inappropriate, and dangerous to his emotional well-being. Mr. Reed has abdicated his responsibilities to an employee with no qualifications, a tragic past of her own, and questionable motives. We will show that this arrangement dishonors the memory of Rebecca Reed and endangers Maxwell's future. Maya's stomach twisted, but she kept her eyes forward. Then Evelyn rose, her tone sharp as a blade. Your Honor, this case is indeed about a child. A child who lost his mother and has been raised with care, love, and stability by his father and those entrusted to help him. The petitioner seeks to weaponize grief, to exploit tragedy for her own gain. We will show that Maxwell Reed is thriving under his father's care, and that the so-called nanny she attacks is the very person who has restored joy to his life. The judge nodded, expression unchanged. Proceed. The first witness called was a family friend who testified about Alexander's grief after Rebecca's death. Victoria's attorney framed him as distant and distracted. Evelyn countered by highlighting Alexander's return to active parenting with Maya's support. The tug-of-war had begun. When Maya's name was finally called, her heart pounded so hard she feared it would echo in the chamber. She rose, walked to the witness stand, and took the oath. The attorney approached with a predatory smile. "Miss Williams, you were hired as a housekeeper, correct?" "Yes." "And yet today, you are acting as a nanny, caretaker, and by your own admission in the press, something of a mother figure to Maxwell. Did you assign yourself these roles?" "No," Maya said firmly. "Maxwell needed more care than housekeeping allowed. Mr. Reed asked me to step in as nanny. I accepted because the boy needed stability," the attorney smirked. "Stability from a woman who lost her own child. Tell the court, Miss Williams, how did your daughter die?" A hush fell over the courtroom. Maya's throat tightened, but she forced the words out. "My daughter Leela was born with a congenital heart defect. Despite every surgery, every treatment I could provide, her heart failed when she was 7. I held her as she died." The attorney leaned closer. "So you failed her." Gasps rippled across the benches. Evelyn shot up. "Objection! Argumentative and cruel." The judge's gavel struck sharply. "Sustained. Counsel, mind your conduct." Maya steadied her breath, her voice trembling but clear. "I did not fail her. I loved her. I gave everything I had. And I carry her with me every day. That doesn't make me unfit. It makes me stronger." For the first time, the attorney faltered. He adjusted his tie, then tried another angle. "Miss Williams, do you love Maxwell?" "Yes," she said without hesitation. "As if he were your own?" "Yes. Even though he is not your child? Even though you have no legal claim to him?" "Yes." The attorney turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I rest my point. This is a woman projecting her loss onto another child, confusing her role, destabilizing his perception of family." But Evelyn rose like a storm. "Or perhaps," she countered, "this is a woman who understands grief better than anyone in this room. A woman who has given Maxwell laughter again when others could only give him pity. Love is not destabilizing. Love is healing. And that is what my client's son needs most." The judge watched, silent, inscrutable. When Maya stepped down, her legs felt like lead. Alexander's eyes followed her, filled with something fierce and unspoken. As she passed, he whispered, "You did more than well. You told the truth." The rest of the hearing blurred. Financial records, testimony from staff, arguments over technicalities, but Maya's words lingered like a weight suspended in the air. When court adjourned for the day, the press swarmed, shouting questions. Alexander shielded her with his presence, guiding her into the car, his hand warm on her back. In the quiet of the ride home, Maxwell's voice echoed in her memory. "You're my Miss Maya. That's the truth." Back at the estate, Maxwell ran to her the moment she walked through the door, wrapping his small arms around her waist. "You're back," he said, relief in his voice. "I dreamed you'd be gone." Maya knelt, hugging him tightly. "I'm not going anywhere, Max." From the doorway, Alexander watched, his expression heavy with exhaustion, but also with something else. Resolve. The day had been brutal, but a shift had begun. Maya had faced the sharpest blade of accusation and had not shattered. Later that night, as Maya sat in her room staring at Leela's photograph, there was a knock at her door. Alexander entered, silent for a long moment. Then he said, "When he hugged you, I realized something. Victoria can call you whatever name she wants, but to him, you're home, and that's what matters." Maya's eyes filled with tears. She whispered, "Do you believe that will be enough?" Alexander met her gaze steadily. "It has to be, and I'll fight until the judge sees it too." The storm outside raged louder than ever. But inside the Reed estate, the foundation had been laid, fragile, contested, but unbreakable. Love, truth, and the promise that they would not surrender. The week after Maya's testimony was the most difficult yet. The press grew more aggressive, circling the estate like vultures. Every grocery delivery, every staff member entering the gates, every flicker of movement drew cameras and speculation. Rumors multiplied. Stories of secret romances, hush money, even of Maya's supposed plan to marry Alexander to secure her place. She stopped reading the papers altogether, but Maxwell still caught glimpses when a headline slipped through. "Miss Maya, why do they say you're stealing us?" he asked one morning, his eyes wide with worry. She knelt beside him, smoothing his hair. "Because they don't understand, Max. But you and your daddy do, and that's enough." Meanwhile, Alexander was relentless. He worked long nights with Evelyn, preparing for the next phase of the case, witness lists, affidavits, financial records. His temper ran short, exhaustion carved deep lines into his face. Yet whenever he passed Maxwell's room and heard Maya reading softly, he paused, his expression softening, as though the sound alone reminded him why he fought. The breaking point came during the second day of testimony. Victoria herself took the stand. Dressed in black once again, clutching Rebecca's photograph, she painted herself as the grieving sister who only wanted what was best for her nephew. "I loved my sister more than anything," she said, her voice cracking artfully, "and I promised her I would protect her son, but what do I see now? A child left in the care of a stranger. A maid who only pretends at motherhood. A man too broken to see he's being manipulated. This is not the life Rebecca wanted for her boy." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. The effect was immediate. Maya sat rigid, her nails digging into her palms. Every word felt like a dagger. She wanted to shout, to defend herself, but Evelyn's warning echoed in her mind. "Do not let them provoke you." When it was Evelyn's turn to cross-examine, she was precise and ruthless. "Miss Hale, you claimed to know what Rebecca wanted. Were you present when she discussed her wishes with her husband?" Victoria stiffened. "No." "Did she name you guardian in her will?" "No." "Did she ever state, in writing or otherwise, that she disapproved of her husband's choices regarding their child?" Victoria faltered. "Not in writing." "So in fact, what you bring here is not Rebecca's voice," Evelyn pressed, "but your own interpretation, driven by your dislike of Miss Williams and your desire to control her nephew's inheritance." Gasps rippled again. Victoria's mask cracked, fury flashing in her eyes. "How dare you—" "Order!" The judge interrupted, striking the gavel. "Proceed carefully, Miss Price." But the damage was done. For the first time, Victoria looked less like a grieving sister and more like a woman grasping for power. After court recessed, Alexander and Maya rode home in silence. Maxwell greeted them at the door, running into Maya's arms. "Did we win today?" he asked, looking up with hope. Maya kissed his hair. "We told the truth, Max. That's what matters." Yet that night, Maya couldn't sleep. She paced her room, staring at the packed bag she had never fully unpacked after writing that letter to Alexander. Fear gnawed at her. What if the truth wasn't enough? What if the judge believed Victoria's tears more than her own composure? She thought of Laya, of holding her daughter and promising she would always be safe, a promise she couldn't keep. Now she feared failing Maxwell the same way. Near midnight, there was a knock. She opened the door to find Alexander standing there, his tie loosened, his face lined with fatigue. "You're awake," he said. "So are you." He stepped inside, closing the door softly. "I saw you today. How you held yourself together while she tried to tear you apart. Most people would have broken. You didn't." Her voice was quiet. "I wanted to. But you didn't." He paused, his eyes searching hers. "Maya, I need you to believe something. You are not the weak link in this fight. You're the reason I can stand in that courtroom at all." The weight of his words pressed against her, too heavy and too tender all at once. "And if we lose," she whispered, "then we appeal. Then we fight again. But we don't give up. Ever." Tears welled in her eyes. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to lean into his certainty, but part of her still feared the storm would drown them. Alexander took a step closer, lowering his voice. "When Rebecca died, I thought the house would stay silent forever. Then you came. And for the first time, I heard laughter again." "Don't let Victoria convince you that's wrong. It's not. It's life." Her breath caught, her heart racing at the rawness in his tone. She looked away before the moment could deepen into something she wasn't ready to face. "You should rest. Tomorrow will be harder." He lingered a moment longer, then nodded. "Good night, Maya." The next day, the judge called for closing arguments to be prepared. Both sides would rest their cases within the week. Outside the courthouse, the press, frenzy grew louder. Victoria doubled down, granting interviews and casting herself as the lone guardian of Rebecca's legacy. Inside the estate, however, a different kind of preparation unfolded. Evelyn gathered Alexander and Maya in the study with stacks of papers. "We need to close strong, Alexander. You must show you're not just a father with money, you're a father with presence. Maya, you must show you're not a replacement but an anchor. Every word counts." Maxwell wandered into the room, dragging his stuffed bear. "What are you talking about?" Maya scooped him into her lap. "We're just planning what to say to the judge, sweetheart." "Then tell her I want to stay here," Maxwell said simply. "That's all she needs to know." The adults exchanged glances. If only it were that simple. That night, Maya found herself in the garden, staring at the pond where she had once saved Maxwell from falling in. The memory struck her. The panic, the instinct, the relief when he laughed and called out, "Miss Maya saved me, Daddy!" It was that truth, she realized, that mattered most. Not qualifications, not headlines, not Victoria's venom. Just love and presence. She whispered into the night as if to Laya, "Help me be strong enough for him." From the shadows of the patio, Alexander's voice answered softly, "You already are." And as they stood in the quiet together, with the storm of the trial still raging, a fragile certainty began to form. They were bruised, battered, and not yet victorious. But they were unbroken. And soon, the judge would have to decide whose version of love deserved to shape Maxwell's future. The morning of the closing arguments arrived with a heavy sky. Clouds pressed low over the courthouse as though mirroring the weight in everyone's hearts. Inside the Reed estate, Maxwell clutched his cowboy hat while Maya buttoned his shirt. He had insisted on coming to court this time. "It's about me, isn't it?" he had asked, his voice small but steady. "Then I should be there." Alexander had hesitated, but Evelyn surprised them both by agreeing. "Sometimes the purest truth comes from the smallest voices," she had said. "It could sway the judge more than any of us." So the boy came, tucked between his father and Maya, his small hand gripping each of theirs as they ascended the courthouse. Steps. Reporters swarmed, cameras flashing, but this time, Maxwell didn't flinch. He lifted his chin, holding tighter to Maya's hand as though drawing courage from her presence. Inside the courtroom, the tension was palpable. Victoria sat ramrod straight, her black dress immaculate, Rebecca's framed photograph gleaming before her on the table. Her attorney adjusted his tie, eyes gleaming with confidence. Across the aisle, Evelyn prepared her notes with surgical precision, while Alexander sat tall beside Maya, his jaw set in stone. The judge entered, gavel striking. "We will hear final arguments. Petitioner, you may proceed." Victoria's attorney rose, his voice resonant. "Your Honor, we do not question Mr. Reed's love for his son. But love, however sincere, is not enough when judgment is impaired. We have shown that Mr. Reed delegated his duties to a housemaid with no qualifications, a woman with a tragic past she has yet to reconcile. We have shown that the child is being thrust into an environment where roles are blurred, boundaries erased, and the memory of his mother dishonored. My client, Victoria Hale, offers stability, clarity, and a proper environment for Maxwell's. Psych. We urge the court to grant guardianship." Maya's stomach knotted as whispers rippled through the benches. Then Evelyn stood. Her tone was calm, but her words carried weight. "Your Honor, the opposing counsel says love is not enough. I say it is the foundation of everything a child needs. Stability is not measured in degrees or titles. It is measured in laughter returning to a child's face, in nightmares soothed, in trust rebuilt. We have shown that under Mr. Reed's care, with Miss Williams's support, Maxwell has not only survived his loss but begun to thrive. To remove him now would not preserve his mother's memory. It would shatter the fragile healing he has found. We ask the court to honor not just the law, but the truth of this child's life." She turned slightly toward Maxwell, who sat quietly beside Maya. The judge's eyes followed. "Young man," the judge said gently, "would you like to speak?" Gasps rippled across the courtroom. Alexander froze, but Maxwell nodded bravely. He stood, clutching his cowboy hat to his chest, and walked to the front. Maya's heart pounded as he climbed onto the small step placed for child witnesses. The judge leaned forward kindly. "Maxwell, can you tell me how you feel about where you live and who takes care of you?" Maxwell took a deep breath. "I live with my daddy. He's sad sometimes, but he loves me. And Miss Maya takes care of me too. She reads to me and she saved me when I almost fell in the pond. She makes spaghetti on Tuesdays because Mommy used to. She makes me feel safe." His voice wavered, but he pressed on. "I don't want to live anywhere else. I want to stay with Daddy, and I want Miss Maya to stay too." Silence filled the room. Even the reporters in the gallery sat motionless. Victoria's face tightened, her knuckles white around the frame of Rebecca's photo. The judge studied Maxwell for a long moment, then nodded gently. "Thank you, Maxwell. That was very brave." The boy returned to his seat, and Maya pulled him close, kissing the top of his head. Alexander's hand found her arm under the table, squeezing once, a silent thank you. He couldn't speak aloud. The judge announced that she would review the testimony and deliver her decision in a week's time. The gavel struck, and the room erupted in noise. Outside, reporters clamored for statements. Alexander shielded Maxwell, refusing to answer. Maya kept her head down, but she could hear the questions. "Was that rehearsed? Miss Williams, are you manipulating the child?" Each word stung, but Maxwell's small hand in hers reminded her of the truth. His words had been his own. Back at the estate, the atmosphere was both exhausted and fragile. Staff moved quietly as though afraid of breaking the silence. Maxwell curled up on the couch with his bear, falling asleep mid-sentence. Maya tucked a blanket around him before slipping into the study, where Alexander stood staring at the fire. "He was remarkable today," she said softly. Alexander nodded, his eyes fixed on the flames. "He was braver than both of us." They stood in silence for a moment, the crackle of fire filling the space. Finally, Alexander turned. His face was weary, but his voice was steady. "Whatever happens next, Maya, you've already changed everything. For him, for me." She swallowed hard. "And what if the judge doesn't see it that way? Then we fight again," he said. "But today, for the first time, I believe we might actually win." Maya's eyes filled, but she held the tears back. She thought of all the nights she had prayed for her daughter to feel safe, and realized she was giving Maxwell what she had once failed to give. That was victory, no matter what a judge decided. Later, as she prepared for bed, she found Maxwell's drawing tucked into her notebook. 3 stick figures stood beneath a bright sun: a boy with a cowboy hat, a tall man, and a woman with long hair. Above them, in shaky letters, Maxwell had written, "My family." Maya pressed the paper to her chest, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. And somewhere deep inside, she felt that the breaking point had come. But instead of shattering, something stronger had emerged. They were no longer just fighting to keep a household together. They were fighting to prove that family is not always written in blood or law, but in love that refuses to let go. The storm had not passed, but for the first time, Maya believed they might see the sun. The courthouse had gone silent after Maxwell's words, but their echoes lingered inside everyone who had heard them. For Alexander and Maya, the next 7 days stretched into an eternity. The judge had promised her ruling within the week, but in that space between, time seemed to slow and sharpen. Every hour felt like a test of endurance. Every headline was a reminder that the world was watching. The press swarmed outside the estate gates as though camping for a festival. Reporters leaned against vans, shouted questions whenever a car entered, and speculated endlessly about the judge's decision. Some anchors called Maxwell's testimony moving and decisive. Others accused Alexander of exploiting a child's grief for sympathy. Maya's name appeared in bold print again and again, the nanny at the center of the storm. Inside, life pressed on, though nothing felt normal. Maxwell tried to keep busy, building elaborate towers with his blocks and asking Maya to read his favorite books twice over. Yet his eyes often flicked toward the adults, searching their faces for reassurance. One evening, as Maya tucked him into bed, he whispered, "What if the judge doesn't listen to me?" Her chest tightened. She brushed his curls from his forehead. "She heard you, Max. Judges are very good at listening. But no matter what happens, you're not alone. Your daddy and I will be right here." "But Aunt Victoria said she'll take me." His voice cracked on the words. Maya gathered him close. "She can't take what's already yours. This is your home, your love for your daddy and mine for you. That's not something anyone can erase." He held her tight, whispering, "Promise you won't go." She closed her eyes. "I promise." Down the hall, Alexander stood unseen, listening. The words pierced him. He realized then that for Maxwell, the fear wasn't losing his father. It was losing Maya. The next morning, Alexander found her in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, teaching Maxwell how to measure flour for pancakes. He watched as the boy spilled half the cup on the counter, laughing when Maya dusted his nose with flour. For a moment, Alexander allowed himself to simply feel it, the warmth of a family, fragile but real. Later, after Maxwell had run outside to play, Alexander stayed behind with Maya. His voice was low, almost hesitant. "You've become the center of his world. Do you know that?" Maya set down the bowl, her expression conflicted. "That's what scares me." "What if the judge decides that's wrong?" He shook his head firmly. "Then the judge is wrong. What you've given him isn't replacement, it's hope, and I'll make sure the court understands that." Their eyes met, lingering longer than either expected. But before the moment deepened, Evelyn arrived for another round of preparation. She spread her files across the dining table. The ruling could go either way. Victoria is relentless, but Maxwell's testimony was powerful. "The judge may weigh it heavily," she said, then glanced at Maya. "Still, they'll keep pressing the narrative that you're unstable. Be ready for more scrutiny, especially if Victoria leaks anything further." Maya nodded, though her stomach tightened. She could endure lies about herself, but the thought of Maxwell caught in the middle made her ache. That evening, as rain pattered against the windows, the estate felt heavier than usual. After Maxwell went to bed, Alexander poured himself a drink in the study. Maya joined him, holding tea instead of whiskey. For a while, they sat in silence, the fire crackling between them. Finally, Alexander spoke. "Do you ever think about what happens after? Not just the ruling, but beyond this trial?" Maya hesitated. "I don't let myself. Every time I imagine it, I think of Laya and how quickly things can vanish. It hurts too much to hope." He studied her, his gaze steady. "Hope isn't weakness, Maya. It's survival. Without it, we'd already have lost." She looked at him, caught between fear and the pull of his words. "And if the judge rules against us?" she asked softly. His jaw tightened. "Then we fight again. But we fight together." Her chest swelled with a mixture of dread and something warmer. She sipped her tea to steady herself. On the 6th day, Victoria made her boldest move yet. A leaked article appeared in the morning paper headlined, "The Nanny's Tragedy, Neglect or Misfortune." It detailed Laya's death in lurid tones, twisting facts into insinuations. "Sources say Maya Williams left her child alone during long work shifts," the article read. Questions remain whether her negligence contributed to the girl's demise. Maya felt sick as she read it. She slammed the paper shut, her hands trembling. "They're dragging Laya through the mud," she whispered. Alexander seized the paper, his face darkening. "This is filth. I'll sue every outlet that printed it." But Maya shook her head, tears brimming. "It doesn't matter. Once it's out, people believe it. They'll look at me and see failure." Alexander gripped her shoulders, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Listen to me. You didn't fail her. You've told me what you sacrificed, what you endured. You loved her with everything you had. That is not failure. And no lie Victoria spreads will change that." Her tears spilled then, hot and unrelenting. For the first time, she didn't try to hide them. Alexander drew her into his arms, holding her tightly as she wept. His voice was steady in her ear. "We'll prove them wrong. For Leia, for Max, for you." The next day was Sunday, the 7th day. The judge's ruling was expected Monday morning. The estate was unnervingly quiet, as though the house itself held its breath. Maxwell sensed it too. He stayed close to Maya, drawing pictures and asking endless questions. That evening he handed her a new drawing. 3 figures under a sun, with a 4th small one floating above them. "That's Laya," he explained. "She's watching us." Maya's chest broke open. She hugged him fiercely, whispering, "Thank you, Max." That night, long after Maxwell was asleep, Maya stood by her window, looking out at the reporters' vans parked at the gates. She thought of the courtroom, of Victoria's venom, of the gavel that would fall tomorrow. She thought of Laya, and of the promise she'd made to Maxwell. "I won't go." There was a knock. Alexander entered quietly, his expression unreadable. "Tomorrow decides everything," he said. Maya nodded, her voice soft. "Yes, but whatever happens, Max knows he's loved, and that's what matters." Alexander stepped closer. "It matters more than you know." He paused, then added, almost in a whisper, "No matter the ruling, Maya, you're already part of this family." Her heart lurched at the words. She wanted to answer, but the lump in her throat silenced her. Instead, she nodded, tears shining in her eyes. And as the house settled into uneasy sleep, both knew that the morning would bring not just a decision from the judge, but the defining moment of their lives. The waiting was over. The verdict was coming. Monday morning broke cold and gray, as though the sky itself withheld its judgment. The Reed estate was awake before dawn. Staff moved in silence. Breakfast sat untouched, and even Maxwell, usually the first to chatter, sat quietly at the table, spinning his spoon in a circle. His cowboy hat rested beside his bowl, as though he knew today was no ordinary day. Maya smoothed his hair. "Eat a little, Max. You'll need your strength." "I'm not hungry," he whispered. His eyes flicked up at her, wide with the fear he couldn't name. "Will they take me today?" Her chest ached. She knelt beside him, cupping his cheek. "No one is taking you away today. We're going to court and we'll listen to the judge. But no matter what happens, you're not alone. You have your daddy, and you have me." Alexander appeared in the doorway, his suit perfectly pressed, though his face was drawn tight with exhaustion. He glanced at Maya, then at his son. "She's right, Max. We walk in together. We walk out together. That's a promise." The ride to the courthouse was silent but heavy with unspoken words. Reporters swarmed the steps when they arrived, shouting questions, flashes exploding. But this time, Alexander didn't shield himself behind silence. He paused, his voice firm. "Today is about my son. Please respect that." It wasn't a plea. It was a command. For once, the crowd quieted as they entered. Inside the courtroom, the tension was suffocating. The judge sat at the bench, expression unreadable. Victoria sat across the aisle, immaculate in another black dress, Rebecca's photograph once more placed prominently before her. She held herself as though she were already victorious, her attorney whispering in her ear. Evelyn guided them to their seats, her face calm but her eyes sharp. "Stay steady," she murmured. "Whatever happens, don't let Victoria see fear." The judge raised the gavel. "This court has heard extensive testimony over the past weeks. The matter before us is one of custody, whether Maxwell Reed shall remain with his father, Alexander Reed, or be placed under the guardianship of his aunt, Victoria Hale." She paused, scanning the room. "This is not a decision I render lightly. The welfare of the child must always come first." Maya's breath caught. Beside her, Maxwell clutched her hand so tightly her fingers tingled. The judge continued. "The petitioner has argued that Mr. Reed, in his grief, has neglected his parental duties, delegating them to an unqualified employee, thereby creating instability for the child. They further argue that Miss Williams's tragic past renders her unfit to assume a maternal role. The respondent, Mr. Reed, has argued that with Miss Williams' support, Maxwell has found stability, joy, and healing after profound loss. The child himself has spoken, expressing a clear and consistent desire to remain in his current home." She paused again, her eyes softening slightly as they flicked to Maxwell. "The testimony of a child so young is never taken lightly. Yet it carries weight when delivered with such sincerity." Maya squeezed his hand, her own heart pounding in her throat. "Having considered all arguments, this court finds," the room seemed to hold its breath, "that the best interest of Maxwell Reed is served by remaining in the custody of his father, Alexander Reed. Petition for guardianship is denied." The gavel struck. For a moment, silence hung suspended. Then Maxwell let out a cry of relief, throwing his arms around Maya. "We won, Miss Maya, we won!" Alexander closed his eyes briefly, his shoulders sagging with the release of weeks of tension. He reached for his son, pulling him close. "Yes, buddy, we won." On the other side of the aisle, Victoria shot to her feet, fury twisting her features. "This is a travesty! That child is being brainwashed, and the court has just sanctioned it. You'll regret this, Alexander." The judge's gavel struck sharply. "Order! Miss Hale, this court has ruled. Further outbursts will not be tolerated." But Victoria's words lingered like venom in the air. Evelyn leaned in quickly. "Ignore her. She may appeal, but this decision is strong. We'll hold." Outside, the courthouse steps erupted into chaos. Reporters shouted, cameras flashed, questions overlapped in a roar. "Mr. Reed, how do you feel?" Miss Williams, are you staying in the Reed household permanently? Victoria, will you appeal the decision? Alexander held Maxwell's hand in one and guided Maya with the other as they pushed through the throng. No statements today, he said firmly, his voice carrying the weight of finality. Today is for my family. Back at the estate, the air felt different, lighter. The staff greeted them with cautious smiles, relief etched on their faces. Maxwell bounded inside, his cowboy hat bouncing. "Spaghetti Tuesday today, right?" he shouted, his joy returning in a flood. Maya laughed, the sound breaking free like sunlight after rain. "Yes, Sheriff Max, extra sauce." Later, in the kitchen, as she stirred the simmering pot, Alexander appeared behind her. His voice was low. "You saved him?" She turned, surprised. "It was the judge who decided." "No," he said firmly. "It was you. You gave him the words. You gave him the strength. You gave me the strength." Her eyes filled with tears. "I only did what anyone would do." "Not anyone," he countered. He stepped closer, his eyes holding hers. "You, Maya, you did?" The silence stretched between them, charged with all the things left unspoken. But then Maxwell burst into the room, tugging at Alexander's hand. "Daddy, come set the table. Miss Maya says it's spaghetti night." Alexander chuckled, breaking the moment. "Coming, champ." Dinner that night was louder than it had been in months. Maxwell slurped noodles, sauce covering his chin, while Maya laughed and wiped him clean. Alexander watched them, his heart full in a way he hadn't thought possible again. For the first time since Rebecca's death, the house felt like a home, not haunted, not hollow, but alive. Later, after Maxwell had gone to bed, Maya found herself standing in the garden near the pond. The moonlight shimmered on the water, the same spot where she had once pulled Maxwell to safety. She closed her eyes, whispering to Laya, "We made it. He's safe." Footsteps crunched on the gravel behind her. Alexander joined her, his hands in his pockets. "I thought I'd find you here," she smiled faintly. "It feels like this place has been a circle, from where I caught him to where I almost lost him." "You never lost him," Alexander said quietly. He hesitated, then added, "And I never want to lose you." Her heart lurched at the words. She looked at him, unsure, but his eyes were steady, filled not with desperation this time, but with gratitude. "With certainty, we'll take it one step at a time," he said. "For him, for us, no matter what comes." Maya nodded, tears shining in her eyes. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe in a future, not just for Maxwell, but for herself too. The storm had broken. The verdict was theirs. And somewhere, in the quiet of the night, hope finally felt safe to stay. The days following the verdict passed like the slow unfolding of spring after a brutal winter. The reporters lingered at the gates, hoping for another scandal. But soon, the headlines shifted. The fury of Victoria's campaign dimmed, overshadowed by other stories, other storms. The Reed estate, once besieged, began to breathe again. Maxwell was the first to sense the change. His nightmares lessened, his laughter returned in bursts of unrestrained joy. He raced through the halls with his cowboy hat tilted askew, called for Maya to join his games, and proudly announced to anyone who would listen, "The judge said I get to stay with Daddy and Miss Maya forever." For Alexander, the relief came, more slowly, layered with the weight of exhaustion. At first he woke at night expecting another fight, another courtroom, another headline. But gradually he realized the war was over. He could finally look at his son without fearing he would be ripped away. And when he looked at Maya, the gratitude he felt was so deep it unsettled him. Maya, too, carried her own quiet transformation. The decision hadn't erased the pain of Laya's loss or the cruelty of Victoria's words, but it had given her something she hadn't dared to claim in years: belonging. She walked the halls of the estate not as a guest or a servant, but as someone who mattered, someone who had a place. One morning, Maxwell climbed into her lap with a sketchbook in hand. "Look, Miss Maya, it's our family." On the page were 3 figures: himself with his cowboy hat, his father tall beside him, and Maya holding his hand. Above them, floating in the sky, was another small figure with wings. "That's Laya," he explained. "She's watching us. From up there. She's smiling now." Maya's eyes blurred with tears. She kissed the top of his head. "You're right, sweetheart." "She is smiling." Later that day, Alexander found her standing in the garden, staring at the drawing. "He's taken to adding her in every picture now," he said softly. Maya nodded. "It's his way of making her part of us." "Maybe it's more than that," Alexander said. "Maybe he feels what you feel, that she's still here somehow." The warmth in his tone disarmed her. She turned to face him, her heart thudding. "You've given him more than safety, Alexander. You've given him the strength to remember with love instead of fear." He shook his head gently. "No, Maya, that was you." The words hung between them, unspoken truth stretching into the silence. She looked away, afraid of the depth in his eyes. As weeks passed, the Second Chance Foundation took shape. Letters poured in from single parents, widowers, and children who had suffered losses. Some shared their grief, others sent donations, but all carried the same message. They saw themselves in Maya's story. She spent hours reading them, tears falling as she realized her pain had become a bridge for others. One evening, the foundation hosted its first small gathering at the estate. Families arrived, tentative but hopeful. Children played on the lawn while parents shared stories over coffee and tears. Maya moved among them, offering hugs, listening, holding space. Alexander watched her from a distance, pride swelling in his chest. When she caught his gaze across the room, her smile was soft but knowing. After the guests left, Maxwell ran in too, her arms. "Miss Maya, can we do this every year so kids don't feel alone?" She kissed his forehead. "Yes, Max. Every year." That night, after Maxwell was tucked in, Maya found herself once again by the pond. The moonlight glimmered across the water, just as it had the night she pulled Maxwell from its edge. It felt symbolic now. This place where fear had once gripped her was now the place where hope returned. Alexander joined her, his hands in his pockets, his presence steady. "You always come out here," he said. "It feels like the heart of this place," she admitted, "where everything almost broke, and where everything began again." He stepped closer. "Maya, I need to say something." Her chest tightened. "Alexander, no, listen." His voice was low but unwavering. "When Rebecca died, I thought my life had ended too. I thought Maxwell would grow up with a father who was only half alive. Then you came. You saved him." "Yes. But you saved me too. You gave me back my son. You gave me back myself." Tears stung her eyes. "I only did what anyone would have done." He shook his head. "Not anyone. You." He paused, his voice softening. "Maya, I don't know what tomorrow looks like, but I know I want you in it. Not as an employee, not as an outsider, as family." Her breath caught. For so long she had feared this moment, feared hope, feared belonging. But looking at him now, with the moonlight painting silver across his face, she realized the truth. She already was family. Maxwell had declared it in his drawings, in his words, in his unwavering trust, and Alexander was only speaking what had been true all along. Slowly she nodded, tears spilling freely. "Then I'll stay. For Maxwell. For you. For us." His relief was visible, his shoulders easing as though a lifelong burden had been lifted. He reached for her hand, not with desperation, but with certainty. She let him hold it, her heart steady in a way it hadn't been in years. Behind them, the house glowed warmly. The sound of Maxwell's laughter, faint even in sleep, echoed through the halls like a blessing. The storm had passed. The battles had scarred them, yes, but they had also shaped them into something stronger. They were no longer just a man, a boy, and a nanny bound by circumstance. They were a family, imperfect, scarred, but whole. And as they stood by the pond, hand in hand beneath the watching moon, Maya whispered to the night, to Laya, to the love that had carried her here. We're safe now. For the first time, she believed it. For the first time, it was true. And so began their new beginning. A future not free of struggle, but full of love. A family bound not by law or blood, but by the kind of truth no storm could erase. The story reminds us that family is not defined by blood alone, but by love, sacrifice, and the courage to stand together in the face of loss. Grief can break us, but it can also shape us into something stronger when we choose to hold on to one another. True strength is not measured by wealth or titles. It is measured by the ability to comfort a child's fears, to defend what is right when others call it wrong, and to remain when it would be easier to walk away. At its heart, this journey teaches us that love, quiet, steady, and unwavering, is the most powerful form of justice. It can heal wounds deeper than courts can see, bridge divisions harsher than words can cut, and remind us that even in the darkest storms, hope is worth fighting for.